What if the name you have spoken your entire life is not the real one? What if the true name of God was never lost, only hidden, protected, and removed from common speech because it was considered too powerful to pronounce? Tonight, we are going to uncover a truth buried beneath language, scripture, history, and silence. And if you stay with me, you will discover why ancient priests feared this name, why scribes refused to write it fully, and why some believe speaking it could change how heaven and earth respond to you. Because this is not just about a name, it is about authority, identity, and the nature of God Himself. Most people believe God has many names. God, Lord, Father, Almighty, Creator, Yahweh, Jehovah, Elohim, Adonai. But what if none of these are actually His name? What if they are titles? And what if the true name was never meant to be spoken casually, not because it was forgotten, but because it was feared? To understand this, we must go back to a time before translations, before churches, before religion as we know it today. We must return to a world where names were not labels, but forces. Where knowing a name meant having access to the essence of a being. In the ancient world, a name was not what you were called. A name was who you were. In early Semitic cultures, names carried meaning, power, and destiny. To know someone's true name was to understand their nature. To speak it was to acknowledge authority. To misuse it was dangerous, and this belief did not apply only to humans. It applied especially to God. But the next part will surprise you even more. Because in the oldest Hebrew texts, God introduces Himself in a way that does not resemble a name at all. When Moses encounters the burning bush and asks who is speaking to him, God does not respond with a simple answer. He gives something mysterious, something unsettling. I am who I am. In Hebrew, this phrase is Ia Asher Eya. It does not mean my name is God. It does not even mean my name is Yahweh. It means existence itself is speaking. It means being is speaking to becoming. And yet, later in the same conversation, God reveals something else, something that scribes would later refuse to pronounce. 4 letters. No vowels. No sound markers. Just symbols. YHWH. This is where the mystery deepens. These 4 letters are known as the Tetragrammaton. They appear thousands of times in the Hebrew scriptures. And yet, no one today can say with absolute certainty how they were originally spoken. Why? Because ancient Israel stopped saying it. Not because they forgot, but because they were afraid. The next revelation uncovers a secret very few people know. By the Second Temple period, Jewish tradition had decided that the name of God was too holy to pronounce aloud. When readers encountered YHWH in Scripture, they substituted it with Adonai, meaning Lord. Over time, even writing the name fully was avoided. Some scribes left spaces. Others altered letters. Some washed their hands before writing it. Others destroyed manuscripts if a mistake was made near the name. This was not superstition. It was reverence mixed with fear. Because the commandment said, "You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain." But what if in vain did not mean profanity? What if it meant misuse? What if the name itself was seen as a conduit of divine presence? In ancient Near Eastern thought, spoken words carried creative power. The universe itself, according to Genesis, was spoken into existence. Let there be light was not poetry, it was action. So if God creates by speaking, what happens when His name is spoken? This question terrified ancient priests. And it should make us pause too. What comes next may change how you see language forever. Modern scholars believe the name YHWH is connected to the Hebrew verb to be, not just existence, but active existence. Becoming, continuing. Eternal presence, not I was, not I will be, but I am. Which means the name of God may not be a sound, but a state of being. And yet, throughout history, people have tried to vocalize it. One attempt produced Yahweh. Another, through a misunderstanding of vowel markings, produced Jehovah. But here's the problem. Ancient Hebrew had no written vowels. Which means any pronunciation today is an educated reconstruction. So when people argue over the correct name, they may be missing the point entirely. Because what if the name was never meant to be reduced to syllables? What if it was meant to be encountered, not pronounced? The next part pulls back the curtain even further. Across cultures there is a pattern. High gods often have hidden names. In Egyptian mythology, knowing the secret name of a god granted power over them. In Mesopotamian texts, divine names were encoded, layered, symbolic. In many traditions, the highest deity is never named directly, only described. Why? Because naming defines. And the God of the Bible resists being defined. He is not confined to form, not bound by time, not limited by language. Even Jesus, when he speaks of God, rarely uses a personal name. He says Father, not as a title of hierarchy, but of relationship. And when asked directly about his own identity, Jesus uses the same phrase spoken at the burning bush. I am. This was not accidental, it was a claim, and it was explosive. Which is why it nearly got him killed before the crucifixion ever happened. Because in that moment, Jesus was not just claiming divine authority. He was invoking the same eternal presence revealed to Moses, existence speaking again, this time in flesh. And that changes everything. Because if the true name of God is tied to being itself, then it cannot be owned. It cannot be controlled. It cannot be weaponized. And perhaps that is why it was hidden. The next revelation may unsettle you. Some ancient mystical traditions believe that God's name was not 4 letters but 72. A complex expansion derived from passages in Exodus, encoded through patterns, mathematics, and breath. Others believe the name could only be spoken in heaven, not on earth. Some believed angels knew it, but humans were never meant to. Which raises a haunting possibility. What if the power of the name was never in pronunciation, but in alignment? What if knowing the name meant living in harmony with what it represents? Truth, presence, justice, mercy, being. Because throughout Scripture, God's concern is not how people pronounce His name, but how they represent it. You bear my name, He says. Do not misrepresent me. Suddenly, the commandment makes sense. Taking the name in vain may mean wearing it without living it. Claiming God while acting against His nature. And if that is true, then the true name of God is not hidden in ancient manuscripts. It is revealed in how He is reflected. And that leads us to the most uncomfortable question of all. If God's name represents His nature, what does the world see when it looks at those who claim to carry it? This is where the mystery opens rather than closes. Because we are still searching, still speaking, still misunderstanding, still reaching for something too vast to contain in words. And maybe that is exactly how it was meant to be. Because the moment we think we have fully named God is the moment we have made Him smaller than He is. And what comes next? The implications of this truth for prayer, power, identity, and the modern world may be the most revealing part of all. And now, as we come to this sacred moment, let us slow down and reflect on what has truly been revealed. We began with a question that most people never dare to ask, not because it lacks importance, but because it carries weight. We asked whether the name of God, the name spoken across centuries, translated across languages, repeated in prayers and songs, was ever meant to be reduced to sound at all. And as we peeled back the layers of scripture, history, language, and silence, a deeper truth emerged. We saw that God did not introduce Himself as a label, but as being itself. I am. Not bound by past or future. Not confined to letters or syllables. Not controlled by human speech. We uncovered how ancient priests trembled at the thought of speaking His name. How scribes washed their hands before writing it. How entire traditions chose silence over misuse. Not because the name was forgotten, but because it was too holy to be handled carelessly. We discovered that what many call the name of God may actually be a doorway, not to pronunciation, but to presence. Not to sound, but to alignment. A truth that reminds us that bearing God's name was never about what we say, but about how we live. And perhaps the most unsettling revelation of all was this, that taking God's name in vain may not mean profanity, but claiming Him while misrepresenting Him. This story was never meant to end with knowledge alone. It was meant to awaken the heart. So now, I ask you, not as a viewer, but as a soul standing before truth. If this message has stirred something in you, do not remain silent. Write your personal confession in the comments. Share a short prayer from your heart. Testify about what God has done in your life, how He saved you, healed you, restored you, guided you, or carried you when you had no strength left. Your words may be the very sign someone else has been waiting for. And I urge you, with urgency and holy responsibility, share this message with at least 10 people or more. Not as content, not as entertainment, but as obedience. Because when this video reaches another soul, it is not just information being shared. It is God's teaching moving forward, crossing screens, crossing borders, entering hearts, and transforming lives. Every share becomes a seed. Every comment becomes a testimony. Every view becomes an opportunity for God to work. Do not underestimate what He can do through one obedient act. If this message reached you, it was not by accident. And if you pass it on, you become part of something far greater than a video. You become a carrier of His name, not in sound, but in truth. And that responsibility is holy,